Galvin Almanza.
Great to be here. So Rudolph Sutton was 67 years old. He was incarcerated for 30 years in a Pennsylvania state prison. He was convicted of being part of a group that was involved in a drug turf stabbing fatality. But Rudolph always said that he was innocent. He loved to read philosophy, computer science, art, and poetry during his time in prison. We're going to show you a picture now of Rudolph and his son, Rudolfo, from a report in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Now, Rudolph had high blood pressure. He had liver problems. He was at high risk of death from COVID-19. And in March, health experts urgently called upon state officials to release aging and vulnerable people in Pennsylvania to avoid accelerating the pandemic statewide and putting people at risk of death. In April, Rudolph was the first person incarcerated in Pennsylvania State Prison to die of COVID-19. The Pennsylvania Innocence Project says that Rudolph Sutton was an innocent man. Rudolph and his son had fought for years to regain their relationship after Rudolph was taken away from his family, and they fought for years to get his case heard. It took 30 years for corroborating witnesses to come forward. The Innocence Project submitted his case to the Philadelphia District Attorney Conviction Integrity Unit, and it took a month that time for Rudolph's chest pains and breathing problems to lead to his death. And that was before his case could be heard. It was just 3 days before a major breakthrough in his case. Rudolph did not live to get to the outcome that he was seeking. And the effort is now focused merely on clearing his name instead of giving him a renewed chance at life with his family. They're trying to stop what happened to Rudolph from happening to other aging, vulnerable people who are incarcerated in Pennsylvania.
So as we listen to what happened to him, to Rudolph, it's important to also talk about sort of the political landscape in Pennsylvania right now. So Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf issued an executive reprieve order that was supposed to release thousands of people in response to the pandemic in Pennsylvania. Instead, Republican lawmakers and some Democrats have slowed the process down by passing legislation creating stringent requirements to early COVID release programs like the governor's reprieve order. And so few people meet the requirements. Just 153 people have been released under this reprieve order out of the thousands promised. And those sorts of delays have caused Pennsylvania state prisons to once again become pandemic hotspots and have contributed to the dramatic rise of cases in Pennsylvania. And so advocates have and are now continuing to call for the rapid release of vulnerable populations, including people who are elderly. And they are also urging the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons to consider more appeals for clemency. And so now there are two Pennsylvania rising star Democrats who are considering running for governor when Wolf retires in 2022. We have Attorney General Josh Shapiro and Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. And they have two very different histories on criminal justice reform in Pennsylvania. So we're going to talk a little bit about those. Emily, why don't you start us out by talking about Attorney General Shapiro?
See, I want everybody to be awesome. I want a world in which I like all the candidates and just can't decide because they're all so fabulous. That's the world I'm going for. So encouragingly, Josh Shapiro does style himself as a supporter of criminal justice reform. But lawyers who are actually representing indigent people and activists from directly impacted communities have some criticism. They say that he hasn't done anything to end mass incarceration in the state. And they say that he indeed has blocked efforts that would scale back incarceration in Pennsylvania. We're talking about from 2000 to 2018, the Board of Pardons in the state recommended just 12 life sentence commutations. What's a commutation? It's basically an opportunity for someone to get the rest of their sentence erased. It's early release for people who are serving life sentences. And in those 18 years, the Board of Pardons picked 12 people. I'm assuming these were very special people who they recommended for commutation. And the board only voted on 30 petitions. In 2019, as a member of that Board of Pardons, Shapiro voted against recommending a commuted life sentence, more than any other member of the board. 60% of the time voted against. That's a problem, according to the folks who are really watching his record carefully in terms of what he's doing to get more people free. That is not all we've heard about roadblocking. In 2017, he joined U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain, who was a Trump acolyte and rumored Republican opponent for the Pennsylvania governor. He joined with McSwain in fighting against, this is so strange to me, fighting against a proposed Philadelphia safe consumption service, Safe House Philly. This turned into a big brouhaha because safe consumption services are medical clinics. Like they are a medical clinic where a person who is suffering from or experiencing a substance use issue can go to safely use instead of using under unsafe circumstances, goodness knows where. So it's a medical clinic that offers a safe space and, medical care to people who are at risk of on-site overdose. It has, the evidence on Safe House Philly and other safe consumption sites is pretty robust, and it shows that these sites eliminate on-site overdose and overdose death. They reduce overdose deaths in the surrounding county, in the entire region, by 30%. So 30% fewer people die. And so it's very confusing why McSwain would be an ally to Shapiro in opposing something that is ostensibly pro-safety.
Emily, I'm really glad that you sort of framed your discussion around Shapiro by talking about how he touts himself as somebody who is a justice reformer. Because I think something that we've talked about, and we talked about it yesterday when we talked about the New Orleans DA race, is how everybody wants a reformer right now, and candidates are catching on to that. And they're saying, okay, I'm going to use the reformer language. The blueprint is out there. People have done it. I know exactly what to say. And it's really important when you see people using that language to go to their records and figure out exactly what that means. Does their record actually line up with what they're saying they're going to do as a candidate? And so, particularly right here, what Shapiro and the Trump supporting McSwain were doing was opposing measures to reduce opioid overdose deaths through evidence-based treatment and prevention. Shapiro and McSwain actually echoed Trump Attorney General Jeff Sessions and said that safe consumption services are illegal under Pennsylvania and federal law and comparable to, quote, crack houses. And luckily, there was a federal judge in Pennsylvania who strongly disagreed and gave this remarkable opinion that criticized the government for making false equivalencies between crack houses and clinics, and saying that such clinics aren't illegal under any federal or state statute. So let's talk a little bit about, well, actually, let's go to a video where Shapiro talks about the opioid crisis. And let's look at his language there. Let's play that right now.
It is my top priority, and it has been since day one. I think it's the top public safety priority in Pennsylvania, and I would say it's also the top public health priority. While I'm not the public health leader of the Commonwealth, I think I am on firm ground saying that. I think there's significant costs. Putting aside human lives, which is the most important part of this, the cost I'm referring to in this is the cost to our state budget, to our county budgets, to our city budgets, everything from Office of Children and Youth to our jails and prisons to the cost to ambulance services and police and others that has gone into to this. And then, most importantly, changing corporate behavior, making sure that if these companies, in fact, turned a blind eye to the addictive nature of these drugs, turned a blind eye to the fact that drugs were being shipped into rural Pennsylvania at alarming rates, really providing the jet fuel for this crisis, that if they knew those things, then they're not only going to have to pay the Commonwealth, but they are also going to have to make sure that they change that behavior going forward.
So this is weird for me to listen to. It's just like, it's breaking my brain, Alana, because he's saying a lot of the right things. This is a public health crisis. Lives are on the line. We do need to invest in health and safety and protecting people. So why would somebody who thinks all these things like be against a safe consumption site? Like what?
He knows the language.
I'm concerned by the degree to which the actions here don't seem to match the rhetoric. And that's exactly kind of what you're talking about, which is like putting on the hat of reform without actually like walking the road of reform. Public health experts are really like firm about the safe consumption site issue. It's not just me who's fixated on it. It's like public health experts feel very, very strongly that this is one of the key components to reducing the opioid pandemic. You can't help people get better if they don't survive to get better, right? Yet we have somebody who just stated his investment in this topic, also ignoring these experts. Now, this isn't just like this one incident. There have been several people who've spoken about this. Pennsylvania advocate Robert Salim Holbrook told The Appeal that Josh Shapiro is, and I'm going to quote here, governing as a traditional prosecutor and maintaining the mass incarceration status quo. His record at the Board of Pardons would warrant a D- because he has cast votes against people who have been in prison for decades, rehabilitated themselves, and have the support of the Department of Corrections. Not easy to get the support of the Department of Corrections, right? Like that's a really high bar. And it always shocks me. This is not unique to Josh Shapiro. Like I remember being shocked when, notably in California, the governor was for a time routinely overturning people who were recommended for parole. So like anytime a public official goes against someone who's earned the correctional support, it's wild. Yeah. And those are strong words by Holbrook, but Holbrook is not alone in his criticism. Nikki Grant, who's an attorney and policy lead at Amistad Law Project, also speaking with The Appeal, referred to Josh Shapiro as, her quote was, not a true progressive. So I guess to sum it up, you asked me about this candidate. Pennsylvania's Attorney General Josh Shapiro is thinking about running for governor. He claims to support justice reform. But advocates are telling a different story. They're saying Shapiro has consistently failed to walk the walk and show up for people who are seeking commutations, for aging people who are incarcerated, for people suffering from substance use disorder. But he has done a great job of showing up and talking the talk on CNN in the context of talking about Pennsylvania politics.
That's not nearly.
Who's the opponent? Tell us about the opponent. Who else are we talking about here?
Well, so Shapiro's has a rumored opponent, and that's current Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. He has a shorter history on justice issues, but in that history, he has a much stronger record. So let's go a little bit through that. So since becoming Lieutenant Governor, he has pushed to legalize cannabis in Pennsylvania, and advocates have also applauded his work to jumpstart the stagnant Board of Pardons. So that's the same board that Josh Shapiro is on and regularly votes to continue incarcerating people who pose no threat to public safety, including potentially innocent people like Rudolph Sutton. And so, for example, that same board that only heard 30 petitions and granted just 12 from 2000 to 2018 jumped to hearing 40 applications and recommended 17 people for commutation in just 2019 alone under Fetterman, who is the chair of the board. And so he has also argued for the broader use of the governor's pardon power, the broad use of commutations, which could save thousands of lives during this particularly deadly global pandemic.
He's also like 6'8", right?
He has like a good beard.
Like a mountain. Not inappropriate, but it's just an important fact. Like this, I think he had some sort of athletic career that I'm probably not fully versed in, but I would not want to be in a fight with John Fetterman. And the same advocates who criticize Shapiro tend to praise Fetterman, right? So again, Robert Salim Holbrook, speaking with The Appeal, said, and I'll quote again, more than anyone in the state, he, referring to Fetterman, has resurrected the commutations process and provided a fair gateway to release for geriatric prisoners who have served decades in prison and have rehabilitated themselves and pose no threat to public safety. He's met with communities most impacted by not just mass incarceration, but also harm and violence, and he's listened to people and made principled positions. So that's a really big deal, especially when he notes like meeting with the communities most impacted, because I think the my favorite slogan that you hear on that is no conversations about us without us, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about justice reform, it's really nice to see a leader who is sitting down with communities who are impacted and hearing directly from them. So based on this information, it really appears that for folks who are justice voters, can we call them justice voters, in like Pennsylvania, it seems like a really clear choice between Shapiro and Fetterman. But it's a hard choice to see, right? Because there's a lot of rhetoric sort of obscuring the real vision of who's walking the walk. Pennsylvania should definitely look at the record of both and encourage them to, make their actions live up to their words. Mm-hmm. Trust in politics is something that we have forgotten about. It is 2020. Like, we are clawing our way back towards trust in politics and trust in politicians and trust in rhetoric and promises. And it's troubling to see, once again, in the context that you and I both care about deeply, someone like Shapiro, making these claims and having this beautiful rhetoric and not living up to those promises. In this moment, especially when people are hungriest for political actors who are going to deliver and who are going to, like I said, walk the walk. These crises are urgent. Mass incarceration is a life or death issue. The pandemic is raging in America's prisons and jails. The opioid epidemic is raging in America's streets. Like, these are two lethal crises, and letting them be washed by rhetoric but not addressed with the requisite level of urgency is literally a death sentence for a lot of people.
That's really perfectly said, Emily, because when voters are deciding who to vote for, they're really determining how many lives could potentially be saved. Because I really can't help but think that if more Democratic leaders acted like Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman and facilitated the rapid release of so many vulnerable people from prisons or jails, that a potentially innocent man like Rudolph Sutton might still be alive today. And so would so many people who served decades, who posed no risk to public safety and died incarcerated. So many of those people might still be alive today. So that's where we are right now. People are dying in jails and prisons in Pennsylvania, including innocent people, including people who are elderly, people who are medically vulnerable. And they're dying due to the failure of elected officials to listen to public health experts, to listen to scientists. And because of that failure, COVID is resurging throughout Pennsylvania. Prisons are hotspots again, and releasing people, including those who are no threat to public safety, it's just the right thing to do. It's a no-brainer. It's what scientists are urgently calling for. Doing so could save lives. And so I hope when that decision comes that it's something that voters really look at the record, look at the receipts, and see who's the right person.
Yeah, Alana, it's funny, between Shapiro and Fetterman, like, that look at the receipts message is actually a message that's like pretty broadly applicable to like basically anyone running for office ever. So it does seem like a stark choice. We got words versus actions. And that is all the time we have to talk about this really important race. But we hope that folks watching, especially folks in Pennsylvania, will kind of do their homework and keep an eye on who's actually living up to the great rhetoric. It does not seem like Shapiro can be trusted to do so. Fetterman, on the other hand, really seems to be taking action. So thank you so much for joining us on The Appeal Live. I'm Emily Galvan-Almanza. This is Alana Sibin. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow The Appeal on Twitter and Facebook. It's at The Appeal or The Appeal News on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Oh, and tomorrow we are going to be back to talk about why the Joe Biden White House should create a commutation unit. So, like Emily said,
that's something I know a little bit about. I'm excited about that. Take care.